This is attorney Andy Marcantel and attorney Marc J. Victor. We are the partners at the Attorneys for Freedom law firm. We got a special guest in the studio today who we're very excited to introduce you to. But first, how you doing today, Marc?
You know what? I always say I'm excited, and I always am excited. People can tell I get excited on these
You're
things.
excitable.
But we got somebody here I'm so happy and honored to have at our law firm.
And proud to have you.
Yes,
frankly.
absolutely. So I think we should get right into who's sitting here, why she's sitting here, and what we're talking about
Love
today.
it. Well, I'd like to introduce all of the listeners to our podcast and our YouTube and social media subscribers to our wonderful paralegal here at the Attorneys for Freedom law firm. Her name is Lauren. She also goes by Lauren Liberty on the internet. And welcome to the show, Miss Lauren.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely honored to even be able to talk with you guys on the show. So a little bit about myself. I actually knew Marc prior to working at Attorneys for Freedom from the Arizona Libertarian Party. And when I decided to make a big career change, I knew that I wanted to get into something involving the law just because I am very passionate about the law and I think that it should work for us the way it was intended to. And I knew that Attorneys for Freedom was where I wanted to end up. So I ended up working at another law firm for a little while, and then as soon as I saw the opportunity to come here, I jumped on it because I know that preserving freedom and liberty is at the forefront of our law firm here, integrity, everything. So that really spoke to who I am as a person, and I knew that I could come to work every day and be proud of my work here.
You know, few things make me happier than when I hear people want to work at our law firm because they're pro-freedom. They learned about us from some speech we gave or some activist thing that we did in the community or something pro-freedom we did. And people come in, and Andy's one of these too, by the way. Andy walked in many, many years ago. How many
I've
years?
been kicking around these halls for about a decade now.
Yeah, and I remember when he walked in as a young whippersnapper. He was in his, second year of law school maybe?
Just starting my third.
Starting third year of law school, and he sat down and said, I'm a pro-freedom guy, and I want to work for a pro-freedom place. He had me there, right? He was hired at that moment because everybody knows that, at least people who know me and know what we're about, know freedom is more important than money. This is why we got Live and Let Live cups here, right? Instead of even Attorneys for Freedom cups, because I'm interested in trying to leave the world better than we found it, right? And that's why you're here. That's why Andy's here. We have so many other members of our team who are also here for the freedom of the thing. And so why don't we get into what you did? You did something recently that makes me and Andy and so many members of our firm here so proud to have you at our firms. Tell our shouldn't say listeners, right? People watching or listening, whatever. People who are tuning into this.
Tell the internet what you do.
Sure. So I have managed to find myself as a Second Amendment activist. It wasn't something that I really ever set out to be, but it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I just kept showing up. So about...
You didn't really have a choice, right? I mean, your husband is crazy gun guy and crazy Marine like me. And so you were kind of sucked into the vortex of the gun world and the freedom world anyways.
Kind of the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yes. My husband, even though he does have, a significant collection and he was in the Marine Corps, he's actually super reserved and quiet unless you get him talking about something.
Personally,
yes. He's a little bit more reserved. So I actually kind of got him out of his shell where I was like, oh, hey, there's this Second Amendment rally. Do you want to go? Just because I know it's something that he would take interest in and he would agree to going to pretty easily. But it was kind of the other way around. I kind of sucked him into the vortex.
Wow,
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. So I had the tremendous luck of meeting Cheryl Todd at the Second Amendment rally in Phoenix 2 years ago. And
Shout out to Cheryl, too. She's got an awesome podcast, awesome show. If you haven't heard of Cheryl Todd, she's big in the gun world here in Arizona, so definitely check her out.
I've been on her show many times,
Yes.
and she's great.
Yes.
And, love them. They do great work over there.
Yes, Gun Freedom Radio. Yes, she's incredible. So she is the state director of the Women for Gun Rights organization, which used to be called the DC Project, but they renamed it because everybody was like, what the heck does DC Project mean? But anyway, about a month after I got involved with Women for Gun Rights, Cheryl reached out to me and she was like, oh, we have an awesome opportunity to testify at the Arizona Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. And there were a couple of different bills, a couple of bills that we were for because they expanded, sort of gun rights and things of that nature, and a couple that we were against. And one of the things that the Women for Gun Rights kind of wants to be seen as is the opposite of the red shirts, which is Moms Demand Action. These people show up at pretty much, I don't even know if they have jobs. Like, they show up at every hearing that they can. They just have numbers that show up. So we showed up in our,
And to be clear, they're an anti-Second Amendment. They, take everybody's guns away and
Yes.
life will be good or something like that.
Correct. They are the complete antithesis of Women for Gun Rights. So one of the bills that I testified on was about how you should be allowed to carry your firearm in what would typically be like a gun-free zone or a sensitive place if you're a concealed carry permit holder. And I testified on that. And I didn't really have anything prepared. I was just going to wing it because I find I actually do pretty well when I just wing things. And I was thinking about, well, what personal experience can I talk about when I want to testify? And I talked about how I am a person with a disabling condition, and I can't fight physically, and I don't have the privilege of being able to just run away because I can't run and I can't wait for the police to show up to help me. And I talked about an experience where I, being a law-abiding citizen, left my firearm at home. I went to a place where I was not allowed to carry it, and I was stalked by a guy from the internet. He had his car started, ready to go, engine running, doors open. He grabs me by my arm and starts dragging me to his vehicle. So there's no doubt in my mind that he was attempting to abduct me. And there was really nothing I could do. Thankfully, with quick thinking, I was able to break free, and there were some cops nearby, so he took off and I survived. But it really made me realize how dangerous gun-free zones actually are, right? And so they give you 90 seconds to testify, and then that's it. You're done talking. And the Senate committee members were able to say yes, no, and then they did if the chairperson gave them the opportunity to speak on why they made their decision. And there was this one senator, and he said, well, if you're so scared all the time, why don't you just stay home? I don't see the need to carry a gun.
There's a great solution.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my first ever experience testifying at the Senate, and of course, I couldn't say anything back, so I couldn't, make any sort of points as to how hypocritical that stance was. But
I'm guessing you have no interest in just staying home for the rest of your life.
No, I like to go and do things, believe it or not.
Who knew?
Yeah, I don't just want to stay home in the kitchen. So that experience has kind of opened the door for me in many ways. Again, Cheryl, she just has been such a gateway to getting my story out there and talking about how important it is for people that, these anti-gun groups don't really think about. They talk about victims of domestic violence and how they're put more at danger when guns are around. Well, I don't want to be a victim, and that's why I carry my gun. I don't not want to carry a gun because I've been a victim of any sort of abuse. And so with the Women for Gun Rights, I've had tremendous opportunities. I recently went to Washington, D.C., and that was huge. I actually met with a ton of Congress members. Well, their staffers. They actually didn't want to meet with us because they were anti-gun. So we met with their staffers. And I also had the honor of speaking at a rally that was at the Supreme Court steps and at a press conference that was in front of the Capitol building. And that was where I also shared my story about what happened and why it's so important. There's actually a bill in Congress right now that's for national reciprocity. And it's your rights to protect yourself and your family shouldn't end at an invisible line.
Maybe we can get some pictures or a link to your speech or something in this video, so if people are interested, they can check it out.
Sure. Yeah, so I think it's really interesting just to clarify what it was that you were in favor of, at least in the part of your story where you were speaking to the Arizona legislature. The idea is if you're a concealed carry permit, here we have to go through training and certain certifications and everything like that, demonstrate some competence with the weapon and things like that. And your position is that if you demonstrate that you're a competent, responsible gun owner, that you should be able to go to places that are otherwise considered protected places or gun-free zones with the firearm.
Yes, that was the specific language of the bill, and anything that expands people's gun rights, I'm going to support.
All right, so in the wake of the Bruen case right now, there's a lot of fervor in certain jurisdictions, usually left-leaning, to expand what it means to be a sensitive place. Seems like we see more and more of these being added every day by legislatures across across the country. Why don't we just start with an overview of what is a sensitive place, what's the history of designating things as sensitive places, and a little bit of the jurisprudence leading up to this moment in history. Mark, you want to give kind of a summary?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, here we are talking about sensitive places. I mean, the Second Amendment doesn't say anything about sensitive places. This is, like so many other things, a judicially created doctrine, right? This is not a statute that was passed. This is something that the Supreme Court really made very popular in the Heller decision that came out. That was really the big decision that got everything going. This was 2008, 5-4 decision. In Heller, they made this quote. It says, "The court's opinion should not be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places, such as schools and government buildings." Then it goes on and talks about commercial sales.
Yeah, let's talk about the Heller ruling real quick, because what Heller was saying was, okay, you definitely have a right, private citizens specifically, not just this whole Second Amendment thing is not just applying to our militia or the armed forces, which was the argument from the other side.
Until 2008, right? And it's an open question until 2008 whether or not, when the Second Amendment speaks of the people, whether it means the same people that are spoken about in, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, or does the people mean, the National Guard?
So finally it's settled in 2008. We had been a country for a while at that point, but finally it's settled in 2008 that we're actually talking about private citizens.
The Supreme Court declares in 2008 in the Heller case that, you have an individual right to keep and bear arms, at least inside your home.
At least inside the home. Naturally, more left-leaning, more gun-grabby jurisdictions kind of grabbed onto that language, and we've been dealing with the aftermath of that ever since.
Yeah, and Bruen comes along 2022. And you can't really overstate how big a decision Bruen is, because Bruen, of course, expands what they said in Heller, which is the individual right to keep and bear arms inside the home to outside the home. And that seemed like it was going to be the big ruling, right? And that seemed obvious to me, because it's not just to keep arms, it's to keep and bear arms. So they said, okay, this right that you have, that we established in Heller, it extends outside the home. But even bigger, in my opinion, in Bruen, and we still haven't seen the fallout of this yet, what they do is they change how we analyze Second Amendment cases. They say, okay, well, forget this whole levels of scrutiny thing, which we could talk about and go off on a tangent about, but we're not going to apply intermediate level of scrutiny. Instead, we're going to completely do a new test. And if it's going to be a valid restriction on the right to keep and bear arms, it has to have some kind of root in the nation's historical traditions. In Bruen, they say gun control laws that identify restricted, quote, sensitive places, such as courthouses and polling places, would still likely pass constitutional muster, though urban areas would not qualify as such sensitive places. So what they're saying here is, look, there are some sensitive places, you can still ban guns there. They don't say how it squares with the Bruen test they just created, which is now wreaking havoc in the lower courts. But they finish up and they kind of anticipate that there are states like New York and Hawaii and New Jersey and California and Maryland
who are just going to attempt to say
the whole city,
urban areas,
the whole city.
So the entire city is now a sensitive place, and
so
of course we're seeing that right now.
Of course, this is where the gun grabbers go, right? California, New York, Hawaii, New Jersey, and Maryland. But this Ancona case comes out of New York, essentially challenging this broad designation of sensitive places. The case was argued at the Second Circuit in, I think it was March of this year, 2023. So we don't have a decision, at least not at the time we're recording this, about the nature of whether or not that huge laundry list is going to be consistent with the ruling in Bruen. Also, New Jersey has a law that's been now argued in front of the Third Circuit. That was just recently argued at the time of this recording, October 25th of 2023, so that's still pending. Hawaii, and the law in Hawaii is very, very shotgun effect, pun intended. In this Wolford versus Lopez case, the Ninth Circuit's going to weigh in. I think that case is at the briefing stage right now. But eventually, this stuff's going to reach the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is going to have to carve out what's a sensitive place and what's not a sensitive place. And I would sure love them to connect the dots about sensitive places in our nation's historical tradition. Because, the same thing happens with prohibited possessors, right, with felons, because we have the Range case now. So Range is decided by the Third Circuit, and that's exactly the question that's raised in the Range case. And on one hand, they say, look, in Heller and in Bruen, both times they say, hey, look, nothing in our decision should be taken to say that we can't prohibit people who are convicted of felony offenses from possessing firearms. That's not really a problem in Heller because they didn't change the test. But in Bruen, where they changed the test, the Third Circuit is now saying in the Range case, we can't connect the dots. We know you said that you can deprive convicted felons, but we don't see anything in the
Where is it in the nation's historical tradition?
Yes, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the Supreme Court does with this stuff. My early prediction is that they're going to have to make some changes here with this test they threw down in Bruen. And also, I'll just close by saying the Supreme Court we have right now is more pro-Second Amendment than I have ever seen in my lifetime, or I think has ever existed in the history of our country. This is a solid 6-3 majority for the Second Amendment. So although the gun grabbers are working mightily to pass a whole bunch of laws, I think at the end of the day, at least I hope at the end of the day, many of these ridiculous laws are going to be found to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court once they review them. So while I'm not saying we should stop fighting on this point, I feel pretty good about where we're headed in the United States, at least as to Second Amendment law.
So to your point about New Jersey in particular, I was reading about this bill that they have, and I don't think a decision has been made on it yet. But they're introducing a whole laundry list of these newly deemed sensitive places. And, they're trying to say how vulnerable these populations are, and that's why they need to be protected from bad people with guns or, anybody with a gun. And it leaves you to the question of where can you actually carry? And it seems like that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're just whittling away at every chance that they get to places where you are allowed to actually carry a firearm.
I think this is a workaround, right, for the anti-gun crowd. Their attitude is, well, the Supreme Court left us a little daylight here. All we got to do is say, hey, it's a sensitive place, and now we can ban guns just like we want. Hey, the whole city's a sensitive place. Look, we should be clear about what people's incentives are, and there are substantial numbers of people in our country who think that law-abiding citizens, competent adults, should just simply not have guns. Andy and I pick juries sometimes, right? And I say, raise your hand if you think the gun laws are not strict enough. And lots of people raise their hand, and we talk to them, and I say, hey, number so-and-so, what are your thoughts? And people will often say, I don't think non-police officers should have guns. I've had police officers say that to me. So we shouldn't be confused about the fact that there are substantial numbers of people who just simply don't want American citizens to have guns. And so this is their daylight to try to deem as many places as possible sensitive places so it fits within the analysis that we'll say the Bruen court laid out.
And to those people, I would love to ask them, well, if you consider these populations and these people so vulnerable, why wouldn't you want to do everything in your power to protect them?
Isn't that right? Part of the problem here, I think, is the media, right? Because if a bad guy does something with a gun, it's going to be all over the news. And if a good guy or gal does something with a gun, there's a defense. You hardly see a blip on it, right? As so many of these stories come up, and I say, why isn't this one all over the news, right? Shopkeeper repels a bad guy with firearm, protects person. You might get a little story, or Fox might run something. One of the pro-gun communities will do something. But as far as the mass media, they just bury it. And if you look at the stats, the number of incidents where somebody uses a gun for a good purpose to defend somebody so far dwarfs the bad uses of guns. And then, of course, the other side will say, well, look at all the deaths from fire. Most of those are suicides. Mm-hmm. Right? Most of them are suicides. Maybe if it wasn't a firearm, it would be some other way to kill. And look, not to minimize that problem. It's a real problem. But the problem is not the gun. The problem is the depression or mental illness of the person who's committing suicide at that point.
Yes. And to your point, this is something that I've also discussed with people. How do you quantify how many attacks or assaults or crimes have been prevented because somebody was carrying a firearm. You can't really put a number on, it would have happened. So that's why there are no statistics for it.
When how many times do you think a bad guy's breaking in the home, right? And maybe the homeowner grabs the shotgun and goes, shh, shh. Mm-hmm. And the bad guy says, I'm out of here. And the homeowner says, I could call the cops and hope that they're not going to, give me some grief. You pulled a gun on somebody. What did you do? And have to deal with that. Or just say, you know what? I think I'm going to go back to bed. And you never hear that, never shows up. I mean, Andy and I, we took in a case just recently where a client used a firearm. And I think we would both say in an appropriate way. And then the police were called. He called the police on himself, as I recall. And the police said, oh, sorry, you did our job. Leave our job to us. You're going to jail, and we're going to charge you with discharging within the city limits.
That's right.
Yeah. And so it was just another example of a time where the good guy called the police. And again, I don't.
You got to think very carefully about when to call the police, unfortunately. This is why we disagree with some other people out there who say the first thing you should do is call 911. This is why we always say, no, if there's a shooting, you don't necessarily call 911. If human life is in imminent danger, then you probably call 911 first. But we've had plenty of cases, plenty of clients over the years where there would be no incident, no crime whatsoever had they not essentially called the police on themselves. So unfortunately, it's a tough decision sometimes.
Yeah, this is, again, why you want to have a program where you can actually get an attorney on the other side of the emergency line, which is something that Lauren knows and everyone at our firm knows. We are prepared. We're going to be dropping a video at some point on our strike force. And maybe we can link to that in this video as well. So if people want to know whether or not the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm is prepared for that emergency call in the middle of the night, they can get a feel of some of the planning that we've done at our firm to be ready for that situation. Because it's very hard to give general advice that applies to everybody wants, what do I do? Well, it depends. It depends what are the facts and circumstances and what's your background like, right? If you have an ugly criminal history, well, you're not going to get any benefit of any doubt here, right? So everything depends on the contours of the particular situation, which is why it's so hard to just give generic advice that applies in every situation.
Well, it should be interesting to keep an eye on all of these upcoming Supreme Court cases. And yeah, I think that I agree with you, Mark, that if there's ever been a time in our Supreme Court's history for a expansion and protection of these important rights we're talking about, it's probably with the current configuration.
Yeah, just one little footnote I want to drop in there. The most dangerous idea probably going on in America right now is being promoted by the Democrats about expanding the United States Supreme Court, because they recognize they're in a 6-3 situation that's not in their favor, and their response to that is, let's just add some more justices onto the United States. It's hard to think of something that could more quickly destroy our nation. Do they not think that if they succeeded at this, the very next president who doesn't like the Supreme Court's going to do exactly the same thing? Look, I wished I could have spoken to the framers of the Constitution and say, look, limit it at 9. Then we don't get FDR's court packing scheme and the New Deal and all that other craziness that came in. But that's the subject of another video. I just wanted to make people aware of that. If you're not aware of the left's attempt to try to pack the court right now, you should be, because to me, that is a stake through the heart of the republic if that happens. And if you want more information about Bruen and Heller and range and the levels of scrutiny that I just discussed, check out a link in the video. I discussed this maybe ad nauseum in a discussion about the range case, and you can check out that discussion in the link. And if you have some comment or something you think I didn't get right, or you want to just give us some feedback, I respond to all civilized comments. It seems so crazy to oppose this, right? I mean, we know most of these horrible mass shootings that we see in the nation happen exactly in these gun-free zones, or you could call them now sensitive places after the Heller decision. These are some of the most dangerous places you can go, where guns are banned, where nobody can stop the crazy person who comes in with the firearm. I mean, as we know, and it's true, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy or gal with a gun. And why wouldn't we want to have as many of those as possible, especially in the areas where we know they're soft targets, right? Where people come in and there's nobody there who can stop them. They get free rein to do whatever they want until the police show up, which you can do a lot of damage in a short period of time. And again, this isn't to be critical of the police. They can't be everywhere at the same time. So what I would call an eminently reasonable thing, what happened with the bill?
It actually did end up passing in the committee, but it died. It didn't end up getting too far after that.
Let's keep everybody at risk of these kinds of problems in these gun-free zones. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, what you did was really important, though, and it's what makes us so proud to have you at the law firm, is you're putting your money where your mouth is. You're actually getting out there and fighting for what you believe in, and you changed somebody's mind. Even though it maybe wasn't enough to get it all the way there to the finish line in this particular instance, just doing the work of changing people's hearts and minds about these issues, educating people. I mean, for a lot of people, the gun is this kind of mysterious, scary, monolithic thing, right? That they just say, oh my God, they've never touched a gun in their life. Well, you're telling me private citizens have those things and they're carrying them around? And so just by you participating in that, and for somebody, I mean, the gun crowd is usually considered a masculine crowd, right? That's why Mark made assumptions about your husband, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But I love the fact that you as a feminine woman are getting out there saying, hey, I have a right to defend myself, and it's even more important because I can't because of, your disabilities and everything like that. So bravo to you for getting out there and standing up for what you believed in. And you did help push the bus in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And that is something that I've gotten a lot. People will see me and, especially on the internet when they just see your little icon on your profile and you're having a discourse. I always get called a stupid liberal because I have colored hair and tattoos and piercings. So I like taking that stereotype of your typical gun owner and turning it on its head and saying, yeah, not everybody that owns a gun is some crazy, wingnut. Everyday people have the right to protect themselves. And I shouldn't have to even explain that.
I mean, there's good and bad in every crime,
sure,
right? And so it's always the bad ones that sort of ruin it for everybody else. We had this moment last week where a freedom activist who I know on a global scale, he's the executive director of Liberty International, and he brought
Shout out to Jacek.
Yeah, shout out to Jacek from Poland. And he brought a whole bunch of freedom activists to our firm, and they sat in our conference room, and a bunch of them were female. And they were real hardcore activists. Weren't they surprised when they ran into a whole bunch of hardcore female activists who work at the Attorneys for Freedom law firm? I just loved watching you interact with them and some of the other females we have who are very pro-freedom at our firm. Really,
wasn't that meeting just filled you with hope and pride and optimism? These are kids from probably about age 20 to 30 on average, maybe a little higher, a little lower, but age 20, 30 on average, identify with the pro-freedom crowd. Some are kind of professed libertarians, but they're all pro-freedom from around the world. We had people in our conference room from Japan, from India, from Argentina, from Portugal, from Spain, from Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just from all over the world talking about freedom, and it was just
they came to my house, and I got to talk to them about live and let live for 2 hours, and they loved it. Then they were like, Jacek says, there's this law firm, and I think it's the only one of its type where the people who run the place and work at the place are super hardcore pro-freedom on every issue. And so he brings the students by, and it was really great to know that we've got, I don't even have to say anything anymore. We got enough people at our firm who are very pro-freedom that we could really have a good conversation about freedom and the state of freedom right now and things that are going well. There's a few, and things that aren't going so well. But you know what? It doesn't deter us, right? The fight for freedom is a fight that's been going on as long as humans have been walking on the planet. It's, I think, the most noble fight that you can be involved in. We're keeping this flame of freedom and liberty, the right to live and let live. Let live is the cost, right? Live is what you want to do. Live your life the way you want to live your life, but you got to let other people, if they want to have red hair and piercings and tattoos, that's their business. If they're competent adults, they make those decisions. And, how does this transfer over into the 2A community? Look, if you're a competent adult and you got some kind of a weapon, if you're not a threat to other people, right, you're not mentally ill or something like that, it's a good thing that you have a weapon because you can defend not only yourself, but other people as well. And the kinds of people that have firearms are exactly those kinds of people, right? We did another video today with a good Samaritan who was trying to stop and protect a woman from being maybe robbed. We don't know. But people who have guns, they don't just have them to protect themselves. They have them to protect themselves and other good people from the bad people we know exist in the world, the aggressors who would steal and rape and rob. And you can't expect the police to be everywhere and be all things to all people at all times. It just is limitations of police officers. So it was great to have you representing our firm like that, and it's great to have you at the firm. And we don't often get the civil department in here, so cheers to our civil. We're going to do a video at some point here soon, really introducing everyone to this awesome civil department that we have at the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm.
Awesome. Okay. Well, do you want to plug any of your social media? I know you go by Lauren Liberty on social media, and you've got some cool videos from those speeches from the Washington, D.C. one. I know we recently featured that on Attorneys for Freedom social media. Plug away.
Sure. My Twitter is Lauren_Liberty_. My website is laurenliberty.com. Tried to make it real easy. And then I just want to give a shout out to Women for Gun Rights. If anybody out there is interested, you can just sign up on their website, womenforgunrights.org. Just punch in your email. They'll get you set up. I think it's also important to note that even though I am very active with Women for Gun Rights, I believe in fighting for gun rights for everybody, not just women, because I did have that point come up recently. Somebody tried to...
Just women get gun rights. No, man.
No, we're all in this fight. We're just using a different point of view and trying to get the wheels turning and try to get people to think outside of the box, that these laws, and when you're taking away civil rights from people, it affects everybody.
Yeah, I mean, don't in so many situations women need the gun rights more than men need the gun rights? I mean, aren't women especially vulnerable in many different situations such that it's really, really important?
I am not a small person. The guy that was dragging me to his car in an attempt to abduct me was smaller than me, and he was strong as hell. So I'm not saying that like all women are weak, but even for me, I don't think of myself as a weak person because of my size. It really surprised me at how much of a disadvantage I was when it came to a physical altercation like that.
Yeah, but also I think it's odd when some people try to pretend as if we're not wired differently, men and women. You know what I mean? Like, and the statistics bear this out, that men are much more likely to try to victimize women in this sense than women are trying to victimize men in this sense, right? So, I mean, to pretend for us to close our eyes to the realities of how human beings are wired and
this is heresy, man. Men and women are different.
Can you believe this?
Can you believe this? Can you say that today?
I know it's 2023, but no, I mean, we shouldn't pretend as if there aren't unique challenges that both of the sexes face, right? And so that's why I think it's so important what you're up to. There's lots. I mean, the 2A crowd is predominantly male. We know that by our YouTube statistics and social media statistics and everything like that, which is why when there are people in the world like Cheryl Todd and like yourself and Liberty Doll, who's also a partner.
And many of the other women at our law firm who are also very pro-freedom.
That's right. I think it's super important.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. We're proud to have you on the team. All right, guys, go and check out attorneysforfreedom.com. Go and check out attorneysonretainer.us to learn more about AOR and what it can do for you. Until next time, my friends, this is Lauren Liberty, Andy Marcantel, and Marc J. Victor signing out. Peace.
Peace.